Do I have, yeah, I have no, I don't see Councilmember Sundberg. Is he here?
I'm here.
Yay.
I'm
And
here.
Councilmember Gardner? I jump on later. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I will go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Policy Committee for December 11th. So again, thank you for being here, and we will start with the approval of the minutes.
I approve the minutes.
Great, thank you. I do as well. So the minutes are approved, and we'll start with our first item, which is the annual information update on oil and gas in Aurora. Looks like Jeffrey Moore.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Bergan, and good morning, council members. I'm Jeffrey Moore, manager of the Energy and Environment Division here for the city. I share my slides, and we'll get started with our annual update on oil and gas in the city and some other environmental issues as well. All right. So we're going to talk about our staff, our wells, operators, production, permitting, our website and improvements there, oil and gas advisory committee, inspections, our income, and then we'll get to some environmental initiatives and legal updates. Our team remains the same. We've got a really strong team, really excited to be working with these high quality individuals. In addition to Maria and Susan, we have Dave Scott, our assistant city attorney. And we're a small team, but we do a lot. And I'm really proud of the work that the team has done this year. All right, wells and status. So we are continuing to add more wells in the city. The columns here you can see by year going back to 2019 when we only had 59 wells. We're up to 189 currently. The greens are ones that are actively producing. The yellow are drilling or in completions phase. So we'll put those together in a single graph. And then we have 67 plugged wells. We added we plugged some wells this year. We also annexed 3 northeast of the city late last year. So we're up to 67 plugged wells. All the wells are in Ward 2, straddling I-70 north and south. You can see the producing sites in red. The sites that are currently being drilled or in completions are in green. The 3 that are north of I-70, the Bijou and Invicta and King, are all pretty close together, and those are just east of Aurora Highlands. And then the Lussing Trust North, down off of Watkins Road, south of I-70. Future drilling shown in blue here. These are the sites that we know about. We certainly could have some others in the future as other operators come in, but these are ones that are referenced in the operator agreements. So we have confidence that those are going to be drilled. There's a few more, but these are the primary ones that we expect. Most are north of I-70 in the future. Mentioning plugged wells, and I said we have 67 of those. As you can see on the map, most of those are north of I-70, certainly concentrated as you get close to Denver International Airport and the Colorado Front Range and Spaceport. So that's where those are. And for context here, we have 67, but Arapahoe County has almost 1,000, and Adams County has over 3,000 plugged wells. So we have a much fewer number to track and keep up with. Our operators, Crestone Peak Resources, which is a subsidiary of Civitas Resources, remains our largest operator. Axis Exploration, which is also a subsidiary of Civitas, is the second largest. Then we also have 1 well from KP Kaufman and the Orphan Well Program through the State Energy and Carbon Management Commission. That's a well that the original operator went bankrupt several years ago, and it's on the state plugging list. So they will plug that well at their expense, but also at their timeline. So it is prioritized, and they will get to it, but we don't have a date of exactly when that well will be plugged. Production in Aurora. The graph here, the oil is in green, natural gas in red, water in blue, and the number of wells is in gray on the secondary axis to the right. Our numbers are less than they were a year ago, but they're starting to go back up. Production from shale, which is what our producing zone is in Ivory Shale, it drops off very quickly after the initial production. So the first couple of months are the highest, and then the wells begin to decline very quickly after that. So when there's a pause in drilling or the number of wells stays consistent for a while, the total production is going to drop off. We're seeing some increase now. We'll probably continue to increase in next year, and then we'll see what happens after that. The values on the graph are in monthly values, and then I've calculated those in daily values there on the right. Natural gas around 47,000 MCF a day, oil around 20,000 barrels a day, and water about 6,000 barrels a day. Other news on production, I might be interested to know, Aurora is now the third largest local government in oil production in the state. Weld County, of course, is first, and the Adams County areas outside of Aurora is second, and Aurora is a very close third. So that's very interesting. We also have the single largest oil producer in the state right now, one of the blue wells, the Blue 4AH. Was drilled this year by Crestone, just north of I-70. And in terms of historic production, that well, the first 90 days was 165,000 barrels of oil. And Civitas believes that that is the largest oil producer ever in the state of Colorado. So very interesting perspective. A lot of production coming from Aurora. All right, I'm going to turn over now to Maria Alvarez, our senior planner, and she's going to talk about permitting and some other topics. Maria? Maria, I saw that you were on. We're not hearing you. Are you muted?
Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
There we go.
Apologies, everyone. Good morning. Here is a table of our permitting efforts for the city. This year, we have processed a total of 11 oil and gas site plan applications, of which 5 well site applications and 6 pipeline applications. All applications have been processed within the agreed timeframes as determined by the operator agreement. Happy to point out that this year we have officially processed our first application through the oil and gas manual. This is not an operator agreement. This is solely applies to Chapter 135 of Aurora City Code, which states an application must go through 2 phases. Each evaluation period has 2 to 3 review cycles, focusing on specific criteria. As you can see, phase 1 of this application was started October of 2023 and received Planning Commission approval in March of 24. That one focused solely on the location itself, whereas phase 2, which was processed fully this year, focused on the environmental surface impacts. As you can see, phase 2 took 48 weeks in comparison to the other applications, only because during this time, our internal reviewers worked with the applicant to establish water delivery plans, as well as road maintenance agreements. So these would normally already be in place. However, this was the first time for this applicant. Wanted to make sure that you could see that processing typically for an operator agreement application is 12 to 13 weeks. As you can see from our internal processing, we do fall within that, meeting 100% of our OA applications within the agreed timeframes. And also happy to announce that for the 6 pipeline applications that we've received, our operator has been doing such a good job that they've been able to reduce their application review process by 50%. Next slide, please. All right, here we have a snapshot of our oil and gas operations within the city of Aurora. This map currently includes site names, locations, inspection reports. These inspection reports take place once a quarter. Before the end of the year, this map will also include permitting information for each of these locations. Most of these sites have gone through the planning process here at the city. Some may have been annexed into the city, so we may not have all of the information, or may have limited information as to the processes that took place, whether it was in Adams County or Arapahoe County. If you take a look at the map itself, there are some black lines. These aren't pipelines. Just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. These are actually access roads that are being depicted. But if you would like more information on any of these sites, please visit our website at auroragov.org/oil and gas. Next slide, please. All right, and our Oil and Gas Advisory Committee. So this, the Energy and Environment also facilitates our committee. The committee meets 6 times per year, third Wednesday of each month. Our advisory committee is comprised of industry professionals, surface owners, and citizens. Currently, there is an industry position available. We received a citizen application, and that will be reviewed at our next meeting. We encourage everyone to come listen to our meetings. These are posted on our website as well as the city clerk's calendar. But yeah, so if you'd like to join us, please do come on over. We like having people at our meetings. That is all for my section. Now, thank you for your time. Let me pass you on to Mrs. Susan Sherman.
Hello, I'm Susan Sherman, Senior Oil and Gas Inspector for the City of Aurora. The purpose of our oil and gas inspections is to protect our people, the environment, and wildlife. We also strive to protect groundwater and surface water resources. We confirm and document compliance with city regulations, drive positive behavior in our operators, find and reduce harmful air emissions through FLIR camera surveys, and verify this with CDPHE and on-site data review per City of Aurora Operator Agreement Codes 15.3.4 and 15.4.2, and we also respond to citizen complaints as soon as possible. We do this through well inspections and associated oil and gas facilities such as pipeline appurtenances, and by just being out there in the Aurora Energy and Environment truck. All inspection reports are accessible through the map on Aurora's oil and gas website within a day of inspection report completion. This slide is a summary of inspections at the Grande North site from construction through production and pipeline. This slide shows the yearly inspection count details, and inspections are done by oil and gas phases. We have construction, drilling, completions. Production inspections are on a quarterly basis where I inspect all the sites and all the wells. Spills and releases are done as they happen. I also do plugging and abandonment inspections and orphan well program well site inspections. Like I said, I also do pipeline inspections quarterly, and we do complaint follow-up inspections, and we had 3 of those this year. One at the Bierstadt for rig lighting, one at the Wattenberg gas plant for flaring, and one truck traffic complaint on 26th Avenue. 2 of those, the Bierstadt and the Wattenberg, are not in Aurora, but they were Aurora citizens, so we followed up. This slide summarizes spills and releases in 2024. I'll start at the bottom with the 4 reportable spills in yellow. Per ECMC Rule 912B, a Form 19 is required for spills and releases in which 1 barrel or more of EMP waste or produced fluids is found outside of containment, or 5 barrels are found inside of containment. See also City of Aurora Operator Agreement Code 14.3 for the same rules. Air releases shown on the top of the slide are found with my FLIR surveys, or in the case of flares, through visual observations. I'm looking for leaks that are existing or probable, hazards to persons or property that requires immediate repair per ECMC 100 series rule definition. Per CDPHE flaring rules, 15 minutes with 10% opacity. An annual review of tonnage will be within permit requirements is allowed. City of Aurora Operator Agreement 19.3 requires that the combustion device must be designed and operated in a manner that will ensure no visible emissions during normal operations. Successes on Aurora inspections this year. 100% of our quarterly inspections of well sites, wells, and pipelines will be completed as planned. And I'm in my truck today to go out and do some inspections. We've had better labeling of tanks and tanker trucks at well sites. We have much collaboration with outside agencies such as CDPHE, Air Pollution Control Division, Colorado Department of Natural Resources, ECMC, their engineering, flow line inspection, environmental, and enforcement groups. We took the Arapahoe County energy specialists on a field trip of our field. The Colorado Produced Water Consortium, we've done document reviews, we've had meetings with them, and a field trip. Our local government group monthly meeting includes the town of Erie, counties of Larimer, Adams, and Boulder, the city and county of Broomfield, etc. ECMC Orphan Well Program review. Jeffrey spoke at the annual hearing for the Orphan Well Program on November 19th, and we were asked to give suggestions to ECMC director in an upcoming meeting on December 19th to help improve orphan well plugging and abandonment numbers and priorities. City of Aurora Oil and Gas has the best drinking water monitoring well program. We've improved on that program by better siting, better DWR permitting, and better baseline sampling procedures. We improved well construction to minimize water used for well development. And also the City of Aurora is #1 in BOP inspections. That's blowout preventer inspections that protect the public and worker safety on a workover rig. So we're always #1. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie and Susan. And yeah, Susan does all of her inspections, quarterly inspections on Wednesdays. So she's always out in the field when we have this meeting. So thank you both for the excellent information there. Income this year, all of our staff is entirely funded by fees from the operators, the annual inspection fee and permit application fees. You can see the numbers here. These continue to grow year over year based on the number of wells and increase of wells and well sites. By next year, we expect we'll probably have enough funds here to consider hiring a second inspector, which would be a great help because Susan's getting pretty far booked up in her time there. Yeah, and then the other area of income that we get is royalties. In the last 12 months, we've received almost $3 million in royalty. The first line there is Crescent Peak Resources. Those are from wells that are producing inside the city limits. The second line is leasing bonuses. So when we sign a new lease with an operator, we generally get an upfront bonus. Those categories both go to the general fund of the city. The second two lines are from operators that are operating in Weld County. These are properties that are owned by Aurora Water. They were purchased for water rights and other purposes, and they also came with mineral interest, and some of them are producing. So those go to the Aurora Water General Fund to offset rate increases. All right, some environmental initiatives. As you know, 2 years ago, we changed our division name to Energy and Environment and got some new responsibilities. We're responsible for investigating and remediating sites with possible contamination. Two of the sites we've been working on heavily this year. One is the Highway 30 landfill, which is at E470 and Highway 30. We have just completed the assessment of corrective measures report. That's due to CDPHE this Friday, and we're on track to submit that to them. The second is we negotiated a cost share with Denver on the Roslyn firefighting remediation, and the work there is nearing completion. Previously, Aurora, before we built Capstick, Aurora Fire used to train with Denver at this facility in Denver, and there was some remediation that needed to be done there. We are still in process with our well workover and maintenance easement. We're nearing completion there. We just sent out a request to the development community last week and asked them to comment by mid-January on our updates that we made there. This is the easement that would provide some space, preserved space around plugged wells in the future, which would allow for future access if needed. And we wouldn't have any houses or structures, in that particular space. So we're working through the details there. We hope to bring that to PDED and to council in the spring. We've completed the initial calibration phase for our air quality monitoring network. We are investigating joining the statewide rollout of the Love My Air program for the release of that data. So stay tuned there. That'll be coming in the spring as well. And then we also assist with some various recycling efforts. All right, I'm going to turn now to Dave Scott, our Assistant City Attorney, for some legal updates. Dave?
Good morning. So, as Jeffrey noted, my name is Dave Scott, and I'm the Assistant City Attorney that works primarily with the Energy and Environment Division on oil and gas permitting and leasing, as well as environmental compliance and remediation. Jeffrey asked me to provide brief updates on a few additional matters beyond those already summarized that may be of interest. First, regarding our mineral leasing program, prior to this year, Colorado municipalities that hold mineral rights could be forced by law to allow an operator to access those minerals, even if the municipality refused to lease those minerals to that operator. That changed this year as the legislature passed SB 24-185, which generally provides for a specific exemption from forced pooling for mineral rights held by municipalities so long as the mineral rights are within the municipality's recognized boundaries. As such, the city is no longer subject to the forced pooling threat, which provides the city with greater flexibility and potentially more negotiating power for mineral leases within the city. Regarding minor revisions to our oil and gas manual, also known as Chapter 135 of the City Code, an ordinance with minor amendments was presented to this committee on November 13th. It cleared study session on December 2nd with no comment or changes and will be presented for its first reading at the December 16th regular meeting of the City Council. Finally, one additional interesting development related to our permitting authority and the impact of oil and gas operations on city infrastructure. For the first time, an oil and gas company sought a permit for surface operations through the permitting authority provided under Chapter 135. As such, we had the opportunity to, among other things, develop and negotiate a new road maintenance agreement between the new operator and the city. Road maintenance agreements are required as part of our permitting program and provide for payments by the operator to the city to offset costs associated with impacts of operations on city roads. We looked at this agreement as setting precedent for future permitting under 135. In short, we successfully negotiated a significant per well payment increase as part of this RMA, which brings us into general alignment with other permitting authorities within the state. Previous payments were in the range of $9,000 per well. The current payment is $40,000 per well. For the site in question, the 8-well pad results in an upfront payment to the city of $320,000 for road maintenance activities. Jeffrey, I'll turn it back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. And that concludes our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Councilmember Sundberg, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Yes, Jeffrey and team, great job. I had a question. When you're measuring production on that graph, are you kept abreast in real time of production? How often are these companies submitting to you production reports?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Sundberg. We don't get direct production numbers here from the operator. We get them from what's filed with the state. So once a month ends, they have 45 days to submit their production numbers to the state, and then they get wrapped up by the state. The state ECMC has a dashboard, which is available, and they update the numbers in real time whenever they get operator reports onto that dashboard. So we can see those numbers there. We also download the information directly from the filed reports and summarize it that way per well within the city. So basically, we could see changes on a monthly basis. We typically do an update twice a year, once for this presentation and once in the spring.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I see Brad Pierce, you have your hand up. I know you're on the Oil and Gas Committee.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Councilmember Bergan. I'm chair of the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee, and I just want to compliment Jeffrey and Maria and Susan and Dave for the outstanding work supporting our committee. I can't say enough good words about all of them. They just are very thorough. They're experts in their field. They attend our meetings every time, and they give updates like you just heard today. So just want to compliment everyone on the oil and gas or energy and environment team, and just want to say thanks for doing that.
Thank you, Brad. And I just wanted to say, yeah, excellent work that you've done. Your team really has excelled in terms of, you know, exceeding expectations. So we really appreciate it. I love hearing that we're #1 in all these different categories. And I think definitely a model for the state. I just have one question on the road maintenance agreement, because you said the new agreement allows payments of, I think it was 40,000 per well. Does that do those funds get dedicated to road maintenance?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes,
then
they-
I guess I know we don't have public safety here, but I mean, not public safety, public works, but is that sufficient to do the repairs? And I guess if the funds are going to the city dedicated, how quickly can the city, I don't know if you can answer this, but how quickly can the city actually do the repairs? Because I think Council Member Sundberg probably gets complaints about road damage.
That's a good question. Thank you. Public Works would be the right one to answer that question fully. But yes, the funds are dedicated in a specific line item in the budget. When they come in, they're set aside specifically for road maintenance. In terms of timing, if the city would do the work on its own, it would be up to the managers of the road department to make that scheduling. There is the possibility of bringing in contractors as well, I believe, to do some of that work, and I think that has been done in the past. Sometimes we ask during the permitting process, we also ask for the operator to make certain upgrades to certain like intersections and things like that for truck turning radius and whatnot. And typically the operator then will hire a contractor to do that work themselves. That sometimes is outside the road maintenance fee. The road maintenance fee is for general, repair of roads along the whole routes that the operators use. But like I said, sometimes there is the opportunity during the permitting phase to require additional specific upgrades of certain intersections.
And so before this agreement, you said it was a reduced amount. So it's always been there, that maintenance agreement, correct?
Correct.
And I guess I was always under the impression that they had to fix the road, that we didn't fix it. I thought it was always on the operator to fix the roads, but it looks like and I don't know if it's a good thing to push it to the city because of all of our priorities of doing road maintenance throughout this entire massive city. But just kind of curious, why we don't just have the operator get that done in a timely basis. And I see Councilmember Sundberg has his hand up.
Thank you for the question. Let me just provide one comment on that. Yes, it's a partnership that we have with the operator. We work together to make sure that the roads are in good condition. We require the operator to keep the roads clean, so there's opportunities so they don't track dirt or mud onto the roads. In certain places, for example, Jewel Avenue, the part that is unpaved, they do the maintenance themselves there whenever it's needed. So they regrade the road, Jewel, and then the part of Yale that comes off of Jewel that's unpaved. So the operator does that work themselves, and we just call them and say, it needs grading, please do it. And they get to it usually within a day when we ask them to do that. So for those sections that are unpaved, they do the work themselves. The other areas, it is a partnership. The city does most of the work themselves, but we use the funds that they provide.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you. The enhanced oil and gas manual that we have that was brought to us by a couple of former council members and yourself, Jeffrey, working on that, does that make us quite literally in the state of Colorado the safest place, the most stringent place to produce oil and gas?
Thank you, Councilmember Sundberg. Yes, I believe that would be accurate. And I think the operators would support that statement. They believe that our rules and regulations are very stringent. Of course, everything that we have as a local jurisdiction is above and beyond the state rules and regulations through the ECMC and CDPHE. So everything we have is above and beyond those regulations. And we're certainly at the top, if not on par with any other jurisdiction, local jurisdiction in the state.
Gotcha. And then I noticed on one of the slides, there was some examples of some spillage and whatever amount, a minor amount, that we respond to that, I believe. And there's like a type of membrane over the soil to help protect? Is that correct? I noticed the Kings had a fairly substantial number there.
Yes. Susan, do you want to comment on those volumes of spills?
In the example of the King, separators are considered vessels, not tanks. So the state does not require them to put a liner under separators. So that one was a big spill because of the separators. The spill on the Chico Watkins pad was a historical spill under a separator and under the compressor. And the Aspen spill was a big area spill, not so big of material they had to take away. That was the Leonardo valve on the top of the tank sprayed all over. Yeah, they don't always that doesn't always happen where liners are.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
I want to thank you for inviting me to the Energy and Environment Symposium in Rifle earlier in the year. That was fascinating. I learned a tremendous amount. For example, we are not, I'm told by experts, experiencing much of an energy transition, but an energy expansion, especially with computing power needed for AI and cloud computing, not to mention transportation, food production, all of that type of thing. So keep up the good work.
Right. Thank you again. We really appreciate it. And now we'll go on to our next item, and that is the UDO amendment for process changes. Janine, or I guess do we have Lena? Are you, who's presenting?
It would be me, actually.
Asia Tibbs.
Oh,
Okay. Want to make sure, can everyone see my screen and hear me all right?
yes.
Okay. Thank you all. My name is Asia Tibbs. I am a planning supervisor for the current planning division of Planning and Business Development. Today I'll be presenting to you an update on the UDO amendment for process changes. So in February earlier this year, I did present to you and we met to review and wrap up the MIG consultant work performed over 2023. This provided a summary of issues and opportunities observed by the development community within the City of Aurora's development review process. Staff highlighted 2 key areas to focus on as a result of these studies and the feedback we received. Those were the master plan process and the approval process. Today, my hope is to highlight the key comments and issues that were received by staff, so what we discussed back in February, the proposed process changes that could address each of the comments that we had received, and ways that we might resolve those concerns, and then the corresponding UDO amendments that would be needed to formally implement those proposed changes. So to start, the first issue, of course, was the master plan process. As you'll recall, this was the most mentioned item in the feedback that we received from the development community. The points here, which I won't go through again, but generally talk about the concerns with the master plan process, mostly related to the amendments, the issue of some projects that were smaller in scope and maybe didn't require a full master plan, but the need to address kind of concurrent reviews. And then, of course, just the idea of developing a preliminary plat process. The infographic on this slide shows what we had suspected back in February, that there was a gap between the master plan process and the site plan process. And we wanted to look and explore the potential to introduce a preliminary plat or a minor master plan to address some of the gap between those processes. Shortly after we met, we did start the formation of the Development Review Process Improvement Strategy Team. It's a very long name. But the process review team included not only planning, but the other departments, the review departments of the city, so Aurora Water and also the development review teams. We began meeting on a bi-weekly basis to evaluate the issues related to master plans and also developed that more into a communications regarding process improvements and a coordinated effort to streamline application reviews across departments. This is a slide that you have also seen that was brought to you through that team's work. This was reviewed over the summer and fall. where we began working on the concept of a new neighborhood plan. The slide before you shows what kind of the intended or the current state at a very high level of the process review for applications is. So of course, a master plan is required for public improvements, to outline public improvements, to show overall uses and conceptual plans for larger developments. And then from there, a site plan is required for planning approvals, for development work, and that typically has an associated plat document. Civil construction drawings then are started, but what we do currently see right now is that site plans and civil sets tend to be a very similar document. Our site plans are overly detailed and do end up providing almost a double review of what we see in the civils. You can also see on this document what we had suspected in February, that there is a large gap between the master plan and the site plan process. There's no application that allows the approval of a preliminary lot layout or a local street network without going to a fully designed site plan. We often see these details either put in a master plan, which then requires subsequent amendments if anything changes, or we see a very long site plan process because some of the conceptual stuff hasn't been worked out and we have to go through a lot of iterations. This is an example of what the process might look like if we do proceed with the neighborhood plan. A neighborhood plan is very similar to a preliminary plat. It lays out kind of a more detailed use of space that we get between the master plan and the site plan. It shows us a street network, not just at the higher level that we see in master plan, but more at a neighborhood level. It gives us a preliminary lot layout and kind of starts to lay out, again, areas or parts of a neighborhood. Another thing that the neighborhood plan can do is it can remove the requirement for what we've sort of developed into these infrastructure site plans or neighborhood site plans, master site plans. There's been a lot of different things happening to try and address what we're missing with the neighborhood plan. But it does eliminate the need to have a site plan for our infrastructure. It allows these neighborhoods to go straight to plat and civils because they really are just laying out infrastructure at that stage. We would still get site plan applications with commercial pad sites, multifamily sites, anywhere where we see vertical buildings and structures, because those are really detailed designs. But it does allow a lot more flexibility for neighborhood planning. And again, it pulls some of that detail that we're typically seeing in master plans out and puts it in a neighborhood plan, which reduces amendments and back and forth. So, you know, we've seen this proposal, we've seen this slide, and you've seen that we've also started working through some pilot programs. We've now, since the last presentation to you this summer, we've now gotten an application completely through approval of a neighborhood plan with the pilot, and they're now in this plat and civil review process stage. So overall, the team believes that the process for a neighborhood plan will help relieve the master plan of unnecessary details that slow down the master plan process and reduce the unnecessary need to frequently amend the document when slight changes are proposed. Furthermore, as I mentioned, it allows applicants to bypass an infrastructure site plan by pairing infrastructure with a preliminary lot layout. We've additionally begun, I did mention, we did begin the pilot program, which is now seeing some movement as far as approvals. And then did want to mention we have some commercial and industrial pad site developments that are preparing for submission. So this doesn't just apply to residential neighborhoods, but can also work kind of as a way of laying out pad sites for commercial and industrial development. So looking here, I did retitle it to New Neighborhood Plan, but it does talk about and addressing all of the points that were brought up by the development community. So, you know, we believe that the neighborhood plan will allow us to process less detailed and more conceptual master plans by pulling that detail into the neighborhood plan. We do think the neighborhood plan can serve as a minor master plan or can address these projects that don't maybe warrant a large master plan, but we still need to see things like street layout and use of space and sometimes minor public improvements. So neighborhood plan can allow for some of those more concurrent submissions. And then again, it makes the master plan more simple rather than trying to put some of those things in the master plan process. It simplifies the amendments because we aren't putting as much information and we think we'll have to amend the master plan less often. And then this, as I mentioned, is basically a preliminary plat process. It's just got a different name. So in addition to all of the items that we tried to address for the development community, we also think the neighborhood plan will do more than that. We believe that it shows the context of infrastructure planning with lot layout and site circulation. So it better pairs the use of land rather than just looking at infrastructure independently. It removes the need for infrastructure site plans, which often become a duplicate of the civil plan review process. And it gives lot layout flexibility by pushing final plat to align with the full engineering at civils. So then moving on to the next major item, which was approval processes. This is what we looked at in February. We did receive feedback with 2 key items related to processes and process approvals. This infographic was shown to you back in February that highlights kind of the complexity of our approval process right now. There are a lot of different things that go into determining whether a project is approved by Planning Commission or whether it's approved by director. This can be anywhere from use standards, whether an adjustment's required, what the type of application is, but we also add some complexity by determining what type the approval would be based off the sub area or the location that it is within the city. And then we have all these extra major and minor applications to try and make some things administrative. So staff wanted to focus on what is the most kind of greatest impact on approval processes. How do we make this clearer and simpler? One of those things which was called out by the development community is the inequality of applications and their approval processes based off of their sub area. And then also wanting us to give more decision-making authority to the director or allowing more approvals to go to the director. So we really focused on those 2 areas. This is an example when we started thinking about what types of applications we have, where they go, and who gets approved right now. Before you is a graphic I kind of call as buckets, demonstrating at a high level the development application decisions that go before the director. Currently, the same type of application, such as the site plan, can sometimes require Planning Commission approval rather than director approval just because of where it's located in the city. Having the same type of application require different approval processes just because of that location can make it a challenge to be dependable, consistent, and reliable for the applicant. As a result, we've heard from the development community that it places an unfair burden on projects in certain areas of the city. The development of subareas does remain an important aspect of the UDO, and I want to be clear that standards in the UDO that are differing based off of subarea are still important. Those will remain in the code and do still apply to projects depending on where it is. So, for example, if you're in a more gridded area of the city, the street and development standards of addressing the street are different than they might be in a more suburban or curvilinear street network. So we do have standards that are very contextual and that do apply to different areas of the city, and those are important to keep, and those will remain in the code. However, the boundaries or the location of those projects don't necessarily need to be influenced by the decision-making process or who the appropriate person is to review it. So when we're looking at the process itself, we really want to be thinking that those procedures should be as simple as possible, but broad enough to address anything that might be covered in that application type. Instead of varying the approval process by its geographic location, staff would propose that we focus on who is the appropriate decision-making body that should be making that type of decision. For example, applications which are more conceptual and have more widespread impacts, such as zoning and master plan reviews, those are more appropriate as discretionary consideration and perhaps a discussion of public hearing. Conversely, applications such as neighborhood plans and site plans Those are very highly regulated already, not only by previous zoning and master plan approvals, but also by the UDO, by manuals and design standards that are adopted by the city. If an application meets those detailed code requirements, there's very little for the commission to even consider. And so a director approval seems more logical at this stage of development. Overall, staff believes that removing the sub-area variations would allow for us to more appropriately match the correct decision maker with the correct decision request. So here's a bucket of how we would propose shifting around the approval processes. The first thing that you'll notice is that by removing those sub-area variations, it removes the number of processes that we have to do. It simplifies that request right off the bat. Secondly, staff then looked at the different types of processes and evaluated which types of applications are more appropriate as discretionary versus which ones are more appropriate as administrative, as I mentioned on the previous slide. Some applications were not impacted by sub-area changes, and so those have stayed the same. Those are things like major adjustment requests, zoning map amendments, which are recommendations to council, and conditional use requests. These items never varied by sub-area, and we don't propose as staff to change who makes those decisions. These are generally discretionary requests, and they are appropriate going before the Planning Commission. The ones that varied, such as master plans and site plans, we needed to decide which bucket to put them in. So we did put master plans within the Planning Commission realm, and then site plans within the director administrative realm. And this goes back to what is the decision request and what level of detail is involved. And then, of course, we have the new neighborhood plan proposed as a change, so we need somewhere for that to go. We did feel that neighborhood plans, the use of space, the layout of developments are still very well addressed in the code and design standard requirements. And so we did put that in the director decision bucket. What we believe this does. We believe it gets higher level regulations and concept plans before the Planning Commission. More minds to consider and weigh the more impactful decisions. Decisions at the Planning Commission level are more directly influenced by the comprehensive plan, which is largely implemented by the Planning Commission. There's a lot more interpretation there and policy guidance that needs to go into those approvals. The more detailed applications, such as the new neighborhood plan and the site plan, which are closely regulated by the UDO, their compliance is more black and white, more straightforward. Approvals for those would be directly linked to code compliance and don't necessarily need a public hearing to obtain approval. Having one body review the decisions for that entire application type also helps build consistency and predictability in the review process. It's more fair for developers who also work in one specific area of the city and consistent practice across the board. One last thing that I want to highlight, because this is a question and something that we take very seriously, public notice and public participation. I did want to note that both for administrative decisions and Planning Commission decisions, public notice is provided for both of these decisions. There is an opportunity for the public to submit comments, to participate in the process. Neighborhood meetings are held for both of these types of processes. And so staff didn't believe that shifting these approvals would prevent or limit the public's ability to participate or engage in the approval process. Rather, we wanted to help focus that engagement to more useful places and times and not necessarily have to shift the decision-making process because of that. Okay, so circling back to the comments and the issues that were brought up by the development community, the 4 items that we had were listed here. This proposal most definitely addresses the equalization request across all sub areas and increases the options for minor site plan approval. So I will note, with the removal of the sub areas, we don't need to mess with the major and minor. This was mostly just to get projects to administrative at site plan level. Now we're making all site plans administrative, so we don't even need to do that. It simplifies the process and again gives greater decision-making authority to the director. The other 2 items on here, I will say updating the recording process We are looking into this as a staff and moving forward with that. It does not require a code amendment, so I didn't address it much today. Also, with an expedited review process, the process review team has been working on this and taking another path forward. Again, doesn't require an amendment to the UDO, so I didn't cover it much today. In addition to all the things that this came up with, staff also believes it provides some additional benefits. Again, it improves consistency and learning for the deciding body, encourages equal development opportunity for all areas of the city without sacrificing the context-sensitive standards that we have related to subareas, and then it simplifies the review processes. And summarizing all of the work that we've done this year, I wanted to note what types of public engagement we have had on each of these processes. So the neighborhood plan, of course, we have not done this in a silo. We've had the review committee working on this. We've had multiple presentations to JTF, to DRAB, to your group PED as we work through the ideas. We also had roundtable discussions with the development community invited to review the neighborhood plan concept. And then, as I mentioned, the pilot program that's underway. The sub-area equalization, we did present this idea and this concept earlier in the year to all of the groups. We also presented it to the PC as an idea in our study session earlier in the spring. In order to proceed with the formal adoption of these two ideas and move forward to kind of allow them to proceed, we do have a UD amendment that would need to happen and need to occur to make this official. Staff is proposing the changes in these following sections, the 4 sections that really address, again, process and application approvals and reviews. This summary was also provided in your packet, but just to go over it briefly, it's removing the sub-area variations so that, site plans and master plans basically have one deciding process and one deciding body. It's basically revising what was the preliminary plat, was not used, was not very functional, to what we now refer to as the neighborhood plan. We also amend different sections of code that address each of those application types. So section 541 and 542 and 543 all talk about master plan processes, subdivisions of land, which is the preliminary plat language, now the neighborhood plan language, and then, of course, site plans and development applications. So we would be essentially shifting and rewriting, amending some of those sections of code to allow for the administrative versus the planning commission approvals and clarifying what those criteria of approval would be. So this is where we're at in the process thus far. Again, earlier this year, we reviewed the MIG and met with the team about what kind of scope and items we would focus on. Over the second and third quarters, we have been working with the development review process teams, getting community feedback and development engagement feedback. Starting Q4, we've had pilot projects and pilot program approvals. We've been drafting regulations to make sure we know what we need to adapt and change. And then now we're moving into that adoption and public hearing stage. So we would be asking the PED if we're comfortable moving forward to formalize the proposed process changes, proceeding with the UDO amendment to modify and establish development application review processes as outlined in the presentation. That is all I have today. I appreciate your patience in going through a whole year's worth of work. I'm excited to hear if you have any questions, thoughts, changes, and if we're allowed to proceed with kind of wrapping this up and finishing up this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. And yeah, this was a lot of work. So thank you very much. I'll start with opening up for questions. I want to say Councilmember Gardner has joined us. He was had a prior meeting. So Councilmember Sundberg or Gardner, questions?
Just to say thank you for going through this process to make these improvements.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Gardner?
Yeah, I have a question. And first, yeah, I really appreciate this process. It's a lot of work, and staff has done a lot of engagement, and I really appreciate that because I think one of the things we hear a lot of times in the city in general when we're making changes is we don't do engagement with those that are going to be affected. And in this case, I know there was a lot of that happened. My question is, so the two most common complaints that I hear from the development community, one is the process takes too long, and two, there's not consistency in terms of comments and reviews and things like that. And so I guess what I'm asking is, can you tell me how these changes address those two concerns that I hear most often?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the neighborhood plan. Give me a second, we're getting there. So I think the neighborhood plan is really meant to address the length of time. You know, the feedback that we did receive was not just in the length of time that it takes to get through an application from one end to the next, but because they get stuck a lot of the time going back through amendments, going back through multiple iterations to fix things as stuff changes. And so we think that the neighborhood plan really helps reduce the need to go back and forth to allow for flexibility and change as the development happens. And so that inherently shortens the project. The other thing that the neighborhood plan does to help with the length of time of a project is it does actually remove some application requirements. Right now, you're required to go through a site plan application every time for everything that you do, including just street layout or infrastructure layout. So there's a lot of these additional application requirements for each step. And those steps are fully engineered. And so you're not doing the right amount of planning at the right stage. And it's making it very difficult, right? Because the development community, the developer is having to fully engineer something before they're even ready to do that. And it takes a lot of time to get a site plan to where an engineer wants to see it fully approved. And so I think this allows this neighborhood plan itself gives an approval to the development community where they can go out and find builders, they can go out and find contractors, they can get stuff ready and mobilize it without having to fully engineer and get full approvals. So it gives them a little opportunity to give, have a good stamp of approval on something to say, okay, this kind of project is going to work here and this type of development is going to work here. We're going to get this many lots of this kind and size, but still allow them to plat and fully engineer it once they've got some of those things in place. So it gives them a little more assurance earlier on, and also makes it shorter. And then I would also note the neighborhood plan process is basically just 2 rounds of review to get to decision. We're not going through these additional technical reviews back and forth. We're allowing them to work out the technical engineering stage at civil. So it kind of shifts the process to allow things to move faster, less amendments, less back and forth, and moving things forward to approval. And we have seen that in the pilot that we've done thus far. We got the neighborhood plan approved in 2 rounds of review. They're in the civil process, and they already have a good idea of what they're approved for, so they can be working on getting stuff mobilized as they get those civils and engineering stuff finalized. So that helps with the process and it helps move things quicker. Yeah.
If I can, Janine Rustad, Director of Planning and Business Development, and I see Jacob popped on, and we may be thinking along the same lines. In addition to these code and process changes, we are working on cultural changes to hold each other accountable, but we're also looking at our acceptance process to make sure we're getting good, complete applications in, which reduce the necessity of multiple rounds of review and increase the risk of inconsistent response comments. But then again, as I said, working on that cultural so that we're working internally together as a team. Jacob, did you want to add on to that?
Hey, thanks, Janine. I think Chris had his hand up first. I'll let him jump in.
Jacob and I would always defer to you, but anyway, I had a couple comments. One, Councilman Gardner, the pilot project that I believe that Asia's referring to has actually been Midtown at Windler, and I will tell you that the results so far have been fantastic. much expedited, much more efficient, really user friendly. So we've been thrilled so far. And I would also, because I'm always quick to complain, as y'all know, I want to also make sure and compliment.
Chris, can you please repeat that 3 times?
Yes. Well, Françoise, I would also like to say a part of what has been helping, Jacob Cox and Asia both deserve a huge recognition and a huge acknowledgement. They've done a fantastic job of shaping the process, and they've been doing a fantastic job shepherding us through the pilot project. And, no matter what system we have, the people involved are really important. Jacob and Asia are doing a phenomenal job, and much appreciated by us. And Councilman Gardner, I would just tell you, I'm a gigantic fan of what we've gone through at Windler Midtown, and I think it could be a huge help to many developers. So again, a great thank you to the city, but primarily a thank you to Asia and Jacob for the first class job they're doing.
Thank you, Chris. And I have a question. Oh,
I appreciate.
Sorry.
Can I just ask one follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and real quick, I never consider a call from you, Chris, a complaint. So, but appreciate the context. I'm curious, Janine, with what you just said about cultural changes, right? Because it's pretty easy to measure, timelines and like how quickly we're getting things through the process and all that, but it's a lot more challenging to measure cultural changes, and it's not really something that we can put into policy, right? Like we can't pass an ordinance that say that, it's hard to pass an ordinance that addresses culture, right? And so I guess I'm curious, like how that's being measured, tracked, like what does that mean in terms of like actual tangible differences?
There is the subjective and objective to that. You're absolutely right. I think subjectively is having more internal meetings, seeing our supervisors, our managers, our teams really buy in, because you need that buy-in to move the needle. And come up with these ideas. We've had other ideas that simplified our administrative decision process come from staff. But objectively, council did instruct the city manager to come up with a bonus structure for development review that is mid-year and year-end. And we use that to help recognize our team members that are taking the initiative, that are really moving the needle. Jacob, anything to add? Because we're partners in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Janine. I would agree. It's very difficult to measure, as you stated, council member. One thing that we're really working on is changing the approach for how reviewers are approaching their reviews. And it's not enough to just shoot for good metrics on each review, because that's also perpetuating the review cycle. And so one complaint that we've heard a lot is going 6-7 rounds review, whether it's a development application or civil plans. Doesn't happen as much on the building side, but we're trying to kind of narrow those down to say, hey, we need to be reviewing objectively to code, our regulations, and our standards, and not seeking perfection and going 6 reviews on these. So that's a big cultural change we're trying to make, and that's from leadership level on down. As Janine mentioned, we're meeting regularly. Asia mentioned it as well. So we have leadership team meetings bi-weekly. We meet with our staff. We're doing all staff meetings to try and kind of put that culture down to every level of the organization. But it's really a shift in how we're reviewing plans across the organization. And that's something that we are trying to figure out how we measure that, but that's also taking the pulse of our development community. We've got a very collaborative relationship with Chris and the other developers that are actively engaged in work in our city. And so we're constantly gut checking that on how are you feeling about things? Do you feel things are moving in a different way? And Chris and I talk a lot about these kinds of topics, but that's one thing that we're working on. And Chris, thank you for your comments. And I would agree, Asia's done amazing work on this update. So thank you, Asia, for everything.
And I have a couple
questions. Yeah, I appreciate. Oh, can I do one more? Sorry.
Yes.
No. One's a comment and one's a request on the incentive. I sponsored that, and so I'm glad to hear that it's implemented and we're seeing results from it. I guess my request would be going forward in the future, and I know we all have a lot of meetings and whatever, but I guess my request would be that maybe we have periodic check-ins on these changes and continue this process rather than check the box, say we made the process easier. We don't need, I guess like a process of continuous improvement, right? Where we continue to check in with this roundtable group of developers and others to always be asking ourselves, what can we do to improve the process? And so, you know, whether that's a 6-month cadence or a year or whatever that looks like, I just hope that we kind of do that ongoing. But again, like, great job, staff, Asia and Jacob and everyone else. You know, it really sounds like some great positive changes. So I appreciate the work.
And I just got a Teams message reminding that we do have the survey question, you know, to asking people how we did on our emails when we send out decisions. And we are looking through our strategic planning, how we get that input, because it can be very subjective. And then Jacob and I were talking yesterday of using the Development Review Advisory Board and JTF the beginning of the year to open the table of, okay, here's what changes we've made. We want to hear from you. So we are having the conversation. It's not always us presenting out to them, but getting the input from them of what they need.
Great. Anything else, Councilmember Gardner?
Nope, I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions before I get to Brad Pierce. I'll say on the cultural changes, and maybe I'll just throw this out. I have heard from developers that they would like to see staff have their camera on. So just a note on that. The complete applications, I know that that's also becomes a sticking point if there's not a complete application, it can cause multiple rounds. So and maybe, I don't know if this is for Jacob, what do you feel that you are providing to developers to guide them to have complete applications? I mean, is it just, if it's not, do you get back to them quickly to say this is missing from the application so it doesn't hold up forever?
Yeah, I would say we've done a lot of work in the last year, particularly on the civil plan intake process. I think the appearance of that was a little bit more subjective in the past. And so we've got it was a tough pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of the development community, because it did complicate some of the submittals, but we now have a pretty smooth process where it's really framed around how the building division approaches it, because it's a little bit more gray on development applications, but when you get into civils, those are construction documents. And so they need to meet code. They need to be 90% or better construction level documents, similar to a building plan set coming in. And it's really easy to point to the IBC to say, hey, this needs to meet these parameters from a acceptable building plan submittal. We needed to do the same thing on civil construction documents. And so it needs to be really clear what they need to submit from a drainage report standpoint, what we're looking for in terms of the traffic sheets, the level of detail, the documentation, and the set. So we're trying to do a much quicker review based on those checklist objective requirements to say, if you haven't made it, you're going to know within a couple days, and we're going to let you know exactly what we need to accept that submittal. The other thing is we've done from a planning side, and I'll let Asia jump in as well on the DA side, but we've really clarified what we need in terms of milestones on the development application into civils to get them to a point, because Chris and other developers, they're really focused right now on building out lots of infrastructure right now. So these large ranging master plans that go on for years of development, I mean, these are decades long projects. We're trying to get a lot of infrastructure approved. So what level of approvals do we need at that master level to let those civils move forward? So we've really done a good job, I think, of creating objective checklist requirements and getting back to them more quickly on acceptable submittals.
Yeah, I think, on the street layouts, a lot of times I'm happy to see that we made these changes, because yeah, if you're taking years to build a development and you've got different filings and things change, and if the street layout maybe made sense at one point but doesn't make sense, a year later or 2 years later, and have that flexibility built in, I think is important. My third point is on public notice. So I was glad to hear that there still would be opportunities for the public to give input, because obviously council members hear from our constituents as to concerns that they might have with developments coming in. So on the neighborhood meetings that go through administratively now, you said that there still would be a neighborhood meeting requirement, and then that constituents could still have input. How would they know to do that? Because normally through the planning commission, they realize that they can give their input to planning commissioners.
Yeah. So administrative decisions still receive, we still send out notice to abutting properties and neighborhood groups. The same notice goes out as what would be going out for planning commission. The notice itself gives them instructions on how to submit comment. They submit comment to the project planner, and that is gathered and collected and provided as part of the decision by the director. Certainly neighborhood meetings, those happen before the decision. So those happen whether it's planning commission or administrative. A neighborhood meeting can be requested by a member of the public, by a neighborhood group. Also, if we see, more than a handful of comments or any kind of consistency of concern, we also ask the applicant to do a neighborhood meeting. So we're pretty proactive about neighborhood meetings and having them held. We can also, a recent project that was a lot of neighborhood concern that was an administrative decision. We worked with the applicant to say we wanted multiple neighborhood meetings because there wasn't a public hearing required. So, we can continue to do that, and we definitely want to keep an eye on it. We want to make sure there's still an engaging process. And if we get to a point where we don't feel like the neighborhood meetings give an opportunity for discussion, an opportunity to resolve some of the concerns, the director always has the ability to call up a decision to planning commission or push it to planning commission. And also, don't forget, they can appeal a decision. So we have all of those mechanisms, certainly, that allow for public hearings. So if there is any concern about removing a public hearing for a site plan application, please know that that's still an option if we get into a situation where the project is controversial or has a lot of public engagement.
So I just had a meeting with a constituent on a development that was already approved over a year ago, wanting to give me some feedback. He felt that it's almost too late by the time there's a neighborhood meeting or the notices go out to HOAs for actually substantial changes to be made. And I don't know, if you can address this, but a lot of times the if the neighborhood, the residents have certain major concerns, the developer may not be able to go back and make any substantial changes because cost to them, they've already done all their landscape drawings, they've done all their infrastructure and so forth. So by the time it gets to the residents giving input, they feel, this particular person feels that it was way too late for the developer to make any substantial changes. So is there any opportunity to have that a little bit sooner?
Yeah, and I think that is part of understanding land entitlement and land development processes. Truly, the place to have the most significant change and impact to a development happening or not happening, right? Like, we're not just talking a few changes here or there, but whether it happens or doesn't happen, that's really decided very early on in the zoning and master plan stages. And so those are the types of decisions that we want to have at a public hearing. We want to make very verbal and vocal, and we want to help our residents understand that those earlier decisions are really what is setting up the right to build and develop that land to the use that's allowed. And so, really moving that public engagement process very early on is definitely a priority and part of what we're doing here. Making sure that, master plans and zoning, those are public hearing processes where we really want to get a lot of public feedback and have discussions there. And they're also, again, they're more discretionary, right? They're not black and white. So a lot of the problem that we have right now with site plans going to planning commission is we have those engaging thinking that they can stop a project or stop a development. And it's too late at that point. The city would be, potentially liable at that point. So,
exactly.
We are in a lot of positions recently with projects that can be controversial where we're taking them to planning commission and they meet the requirements. So, it puts us in a tough spot. So I think.
Yeah, and I think it actually puts the developer in a tough spot too, because the collaboration that, maybe could have happened earlier, something that maybe they didn't consider could be a good idea, and that they could make that change, but by the time it gets down the road, it's too late. So I just wanted to, see if that was possible. I think that is it from me. Brad Pierce, I know you have had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Bergan. This discussion about HOA notification and input and all that is really interesting. A long time ago, I was an HOA president, so the whole neighborhood input notification process is really interesting. My question is, in terms of administrative decisions, can they be posted on the planning department website? Because I just did some checking here a minute ago and trying to find it. And I really think the neighborhoods, they give their input on something that's administratively decided. They never hear back, as far as I know, what was decided. And I believe it used to be anyway, every time there's administrative decision, there's a call-up deadline by city council. Mm-hmm. So I just would like to have a request from my little lowly citizen is put the administrative decisions on the website so people can see what was decided.
Certainly. Absolutely. And we do have a lot of communication when there is public interest in projects. The case planner is usually corresponding with anyone interested, and we make them aware of the call-up deadline and the decisions and stuff like that too. But definitely, it's a great idea. We'll look into that.
Okay. Well, it was a great presentation. Again, thank you for all the work. Again, I echo what Councilmember Gardner said in terms of very happy to hear that a lot of different stakeholders were involved in the process, and look forward to, so I guess our question is whether to approve to move this forward, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yes, Councilmember Sundberg and Gardner?
Yes.
Okay with me.
Okay with me. Looks good. All right, thanks again.
You.
And we'll move on to our last item, which is the Gun Club Road update. Laura Perry.
Yes, I'll kick it off and then hand it over to Jacob and Kathy Valencia, who'll be presenting today. So this was a request from Councilmember Sundberg to present on Gun Club Road, roles and responsibilities along Gun Club Road for improvements, and then talk through some options that we are evaluating and having conversations on. So we'll give a high-level overview and an update on what we're exploring. So Jacob, take us away.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Kathy, for sharing. So, yes, Gun Club, as you all know, is a very complicated stretch of road. We've got about 8 miles. The ideal scenario is to get it improved from Airport to Quincy, which is 7.5, 8 miles or so. You've got a bridge at 470 that needs to be improved, and you've got a lot of developer adjacency responsibilities based on the public improvement plans in place. So as a high-level overview of kind of the master plan process, when a developer comes in with a master plan, normally we've got annexation agreements that underlie the land. Some of those that were annexed in the 80s to 90s might be expired, but we do have master plans. Those do not expire. And so in those master plans, we have public improvements documents. So the PIP document that you might hear about is the public improvements phasing document. And that stipulates triggers for adjacency as pad sites come in and develop. And so as I look at this stretch, Kathy, if you go to the next slide, please. I think we've got an image. Perfect. Thank you. So you see there in red the stretch that we're talking about, and that stretch is actually CDOT jurisdiction. So State Highway 30, Gun Club Road from Quincy Avenue up to Airport, that's all CDOT jurisdiction. So we've got some jurisdictional challenges between CDOT, City of Aurora with developer responsibilities, and there's a lot of this that's actually adjacent to lands that are in Arapahoe County that have not been annexed. And so those present all kinds of challenges in terms of jurisdictional abilities, responsibilities. And so I'll talk a little bit about the broad stretch and some of the complexities here, and then Kathy's going to jump in here at the end to talk about some of the projects that we've got in the works in an interim fashion. And I'll let Kathy probably talk more about that Gun Club stretch from 6th to Mississippi there over to the east side, and some capacity and safety analysis there. There's a lot of that stretch of road you're seeing in the blue on this map that's actually in the county jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I think the next slide, Kathy. Thank you. So this stretch is what we're primarily focused on at the moment. This is a major bottleneck, as we all know. So the southern end there in green, unincorporated Arapahoe County, there's that is challenging because it's adjacent to the landfill site. And so we've had some conversations over the course of this last year and going back several years now to talk with the county about how they're approaching that stretch, because it really is in their jurisdiction. So Arapahoe County is discussing some options to try and improve that stretch of road. They're very mindful of the work we're doing to the south, particularly with some of the SREA funding that we're working on with connecting up from the south, from Aurora Parkway up to Quincy, and this stretch trying to improve this area. And this is about 4 miles to get from Quincy to 470. The blue stretch is what I'm going to focus on right now in terms of the developer responsibilities. This is what we're working on in terms of our coordination with the county and developers. So you've got Murphy Creek that does have a lot of responsibility on the eastern portion. This is a 6-lane road, about 140 to 144 feet of right-of-way in this section. It is a large road. We've got a patchwork of improvements right now. If you look at the master plans in this area, Murphy Creek has the largest portion to the east, and it's mostly that blue area you see on the map. The eastern portion of that, 3 lanes, would be the responsibility of the Murphy Creek development. There is a new master plan to the west side that's actually coming in on the southern edge of that blue portion you see from Quincy up almost to Jewel. It doesn't quite go to Jewel. There is a commercial parcel there on the corner. So you do have some commercial interest and light industrial interest that's coming in. It's different zoning as you go north of Quincy on the west side of Gun Club. So we do think that there's going to be some improvement to Gun Club starting about Quincy and moving towards Jewel, not quite to the corner. It's about 75% of that frontage that is anticipated to be improved with a master plan that's coming in. The city does own a parcel there as it makes the jog to the west, and so there is some city responsibility as well. So there's a lot of complexity here, as I mentioned, in terms of responsibilities, ownership. There's a little bit of a patchwork of developer responsibility, but I do anticipate over the course of the next year we are going to start to see some improvement, particularly on the western frontage of half the road getting improved with some developer interventions. And Kathy, if you want to go to the next slide, please. And so some agency responsibilities, as I mentioned. So Gun Club, State Highway 30, owned and maintained by CDOT from Airport to Quincy. CDOT owned and maintained signals at Alameda, Jewel, and Hampton. Adjacent development in the city of Aurora and unincorporated Arapahoe County, as I just mentioned. Gun Club north of Mississippi, so 1,000 feet north of Bayard, is maintained by Arapahoe County. And Kathy's going to go over that with a little bit more detail here shortly. Everything south is maintained by the city of Aurora, and the city of Aurora does plow for the entire stretch of that portion of Gun Club. So CDOT, Aurora, and Arapahoe County have met this year to discuss potential improvements. We have heard that CDOT would like to devolve the roadway in its current condition to either the city of Aurora or Arapahoe County, so we're starting those conversations. More to come on that. And there is agreement that widening is unlikely to be funded. You know, the state and the feds do not want to see widening projects funded, and so we're looking for how we approach some operational enhancements, some safety enhancements, and work with developers. And you all may have heard, you know, there was some conversations about Maria, which was the middle Aurora equivalent of what we have in Syria with the authority. We did have some conversations over the last couple of years. We are still in discussions with some developers right now about how we could approach particularly this portion of Gun Club. There are some major gaps. We're also concerned about some of the bridges in the area of this portion of Aurora. So we are looking and working with developers in the area to see if we could approach maybe an authority model based on some of the gaps. So that's something, nothing confirmed right now, but it's something we are exploring. Next slide, Kathy. And I'll let Kathy jump in with projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Kathy, and I am the Transportation Manager in Public Works. And so today I will be talking to you about projects that have been completed in the corridor and upcoming projects, and then discuss our next steps for Gun Club. So in 2017, a preliminary design of Gun Club from 6th Avenue to Yale was completed. This project took the design to a conceptual level and provided cost estimates of 3 alternatives. The alternatives considered were a 6-lane urban section, a 4-lane rural section, and intersection improvements. Estimated costs are shown for each alternative, but keep in mind that these costs were from 2017 and construction costs have increased substantially since then. I'm going to come back to this slide in a few slides and discuss more about this project and where we're at. So this next slide is a Arapahoe County study that the city is also involved in. We are partnering with the county on this study from Gun Club and Alameda to address safety and capacity issues. So the project limits for this study are from Gun Club, on Gun Club from 6th Avenue to Mississippi Avenue, and then Alameda Avenue from Gun Club to Harvest Road. Design should be complete in the spring of 2025, and the county has secured construction funding for a signal at Alameda and Mississippi that will be constructed in 2025. Next up for this project will be Arapahoe County leading the effort to provide some kind of a traffic calming on Alameda Avenue. And the county is leading that effort. Alameda is a county-owned road. This next one is the Gun Club multimodal improvements. This project will provide final design for roadway widening and multimodal improvements along Gun Club from Quincy Avenue to Aurora Parkway, so just south of where Jacob was showing us on the previous map. Currently, this section of roadway is a 2-lane section with 1 travel lane in each direction, and the new design will provide 2 travel lanes in each direction with intersection improvements and multi-use paths. Design for this project is fully funded with the Dr. Cog grant and a local match provided by the city and Arapahoe County. And we are working with SREA on construction funding. Design will continue through 2027, and then we will just continue to work with SREA to get this project built. This next slide is a map of our planned signals in the area. So the green dots are existing signals, yellow dots will be constructed in 2025, and then the red dots are locations of future signals. And the timeline for these future signals is determined by warrant studies as development occurs. So project funding for Gun Club, which is also State Highway 30. So the city, CDOT, and Arapahoe County have been meeting for many years to discuss this section of roadway. As discussed previously, this section of roadway is owned and maintained by CDOT. CDOT does have $25 million planned, but not programmed, for their 10-year plan for this segment. But we did, like Jacob said, we did confirm that these funds are meant for devolution to either the city or the county. Arapahoe County does not have any plans for improvements, but in meetings with them, they have discussed possibly partnering on safety and operational improvements. And then just to kind of talk about the costs of widening and just to kind of explain a little more why widening is probably not going to occur anytime soon. It's just the cost is very expensive, $175 million to widen to a 6-lane section and $145 million to widen to a 4-lane section. And these are very high level estimates, but just kind of get you in the ballpark of what we're talking about here. So as Jacob mentioned, we have been meeting with CDOT and Arapahoe County, and we all agree that funding the full widening at this time is unlikely, but we are going to start focusing on smaller safety and operational improvements that can still have a big impact. So for our current efforts and next steps, we will continue to work with CDOT and the county on coordination meetings. So we all agreed that we could look at the evaluating safety and operational improvements. And the city took the lead on, we're working right now to hire a design consultant to evaluate the recommended alternatives from that preliminary design in 2017. And we're going to look at updating those recommendations for improvements with new cost estimates. And then from there, we're going to coordinate with CDOT and Arapahoe County on potentially funding those improvements. There are some grant opportunities coming up that are available. The HSIP grant is available every year for safety improvements. And then the next Dr. Cog tip cycle, which is a Transportation Improvement Program grant, will be coming up in 2029. So I think that's something we could look at as far as construction funding. And then we will also continue to partner with the development community on phasing opportunities. And that was everything I had. And please let us know if you have any questions, and we'd be happy to answer those questions now.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always been such a complicated issue. Councilmember Sundberg, I'm sure you have some questions.
Go ahead, Councilmember Bergan. I'll let you go first.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I always thought my area was complicated, but yours is like 10 times more. My question is with CDOT. So they have the majority of the responsibility. I mean, I know with Arapahoe County, we have that one section. And then there's a little bit of developer responsibility. When you talk about there's $25 million dollars planned for devolution, meaning that they would, because I think we tried to buy the road from them many, many, many years ago, maybe over a decade ago, and they refused. So is that what they're basically saying? We'll give you 25 million, and then you then have responsibility for the entire stretch to widen it, which is crazy, because if it cost 175 million to widen the entire section, why on earth would we negotiate to take on responsibility with only with them only giving us $25 million?
Yes, that is exactly right. And that is why both the city and the county have said no. We basically said before we were to accept the roadway, we would need you to improve it to a 4-lane section. And that's not something CDOT's willing to do. So we're kind of stuck in this game. I've been dealing with this because previously I was with Arapahoe County dealing with the same issue, but both the city and the county have said no to CDOT. But that 25 million, is basically to say, here you go, here's the roadway, and here's 25 million to improvement. That's not nearly enough.
Of course not. So the discussions that have been had with CDOT, what level of CDOT is involved? I mean, is it going to high level decision makers? I find it very frustrating that we cannot get some sort of federal fund. I know it's state funding with CDOT, but can CDOT not apply for federal funding? And maybe we need to get all the constituents writing CDOT and complaining, because we have been ignored for decades.
Every time I've met with CDOT on it, they all agree that it needs to be improved. I think my personal opinion is CDOT has a lot bigger priorities going on rather than this section of roadway. I-25, I-70, 225, I-270. And so in my opinion, to CDOT, this is kind of like smaller on their list of to-dos, but for us and for the county, it's a high priority. So I think the key is just to work together with them. And I discussed with them about these safety and operational improvements that we're going to be looking at. And I feel pretty good about them helping to fund those. So we'll continue to work with them. But mostly I think it'll be kind of building off that 2017 study that kind of listed some improvements, some phasing options that could make a difference out there.
Is there any way for us from a legislative lobbying perspective to have, advisory committee lobby the state legislators to push CDOT to prioritize this a little bit better? I mean, I understand you've got I-25 and I-70 and 225, but they're just pushing the can down the road on Gun Club, and it'll never be done.
Councilmember Bergan, if I can jump in here, we need more conversation with CDOT on this and agree at a higher level. Once we have FHU complete the recosting exercise, the phasing exercise, we'll have better information to go to CDOT and say, hey, what are the options? How can you partner with us? Another option is, looking at federalizing more of Gun Club Road and Councilmember Sundberg's ward to see, similar to what we were successful in the Dr. Cobb process, garnering design monies for Gun Club in your ward. Can we do the same in Councilmember Sundberg's ward for Gun Club? And so we're looking at all these various options. The first step is updating the phasing to see how we can sequentially tackle the project while we concurrently have conversations with all of our stakeholders and also address some key safety and operational improvements that Kathy referenced that CDOT is willing to partner with us on.
And then just real quick on the Murphy Creek development. So they would be responsible for improvements. Is that widening their section? Is that
Jacob, can you
correct? The Murphy Creek master plan stipulates that their entire frontage, they're on the hook for 3 lanes of the 6 lanes.
But that actually doesn't help when it would bottleneck. So if they even did that improvement without the rest of the road being done, basically same problem exists.
Correct. Yeah, we oftentimes will approach things with a deferral if it doesn't make sense to get the entire section. We don't want that because that involves weird tapering, as you mentioned. So we would potentially do deferrals depending on the section, but we would try to figure out a compromise approach that made sense in terms of what it's connecting to.
And then my third and final question, why was Maria not a viable option?
So we had lots of conversations with the developers in this portion of Aurora. The numbers just didn't quite pencil out in terms of the metro districts that were trying to be involved in Maria and the level of improvements that people were trying to get. And so it went really far east. It went out towards the East Aurora annexation areas that are miles from Gun Club, as you know. But it involved bridges. It involved, my opinion of the talks breaking down was really a lot around a lot of the developer-driven infrastructure. And so I think the developers decided, hey, we'll just handle our infrastructure with our own districts and maybe not approach the authority model. It just wasn't quite penciling out at the time with the districts at the time. And so I think it could become viable if we had a strategic approach with maybe some additional districts and looking at the numbers, particularly with commercial in the corridor now.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilmember Sundberg?
Oh boy, let's see. Like I say, we could bring in federal help, but we only built 7 or 8 charging stations with $8 billion in the last 4 years. When I inquired about this a year and a half ago, it was under a study when I spoke with Mac. And maybe that was more about design purposes. There's just so many questions. Perhaps we could look at the smaller safety and operational improvements in more detail in a future meeting, because that's what's practical at this point. And when I hear from so many residents, it's really about safety, especially in the wintertime on this narrow road, on that stretch near Murphy Creek. You see so many cars in the ditch on an icy night. Phasing, Arapahoe County seems to be going to be more flush with money. Flush is the right word after they debruise. But why in the world can't they improve next to the landfill? And if you look there, southbound, turning on to Hamden, a turn lane was put in. Something so simple as that has really helped. I don't know who was behind that, but I applaud them on something so basic, and I'm sure it was still expensive.
That was a CDOT project, Councilmember.
Oh,
was it? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was practically helpful. I mean, people were even four-wheeling their own way to turn. But do we need the governor on this? It just seems like we need some higher level push to get things going. And I know it is complicated. I know it's going to take phasing. And now I'll say it publicly. We've got a developer in Murphy Creek who's shirking his responsibilities to improve his section. Wants to blame it on CDOT and the high cost when they've known for 2.5, 3 decades that's their responsibility. And that's really disappointing. But yes, thank you for looking into this. Thank you for the planning. It remains frustrating. Councilmember Bergan and myself, we had a resolution to a couple years ago about this. Yeah. But please continue to push. I'd like to learn more about the operational and the practical safety aspects, because people are going to be asking. And yeah, thank you.
And I will say, because I also sit on the transportation committee, and so I'm sure you'll have updates to that committee as well for 2025.
Yes.
But it almost seems like something like ARTA is in its own specialized form is needed here to really tackle this thing.
That's basically SORIA. That's the same organization or authority, I guess I should say.
Yeah, we will continue to explore that, Councilmember.
Yeah, not to mention bridges on Jewel going east, right? Which are
correct.
Many tens of millions of dollars. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Gardner, did you have any questions?
No questions. I mean, when I was running last year, when I was out talking to residents in Ward 6 and 2, I didn't hear about public safety. I heard about Gun Club. And I think a lot of people were surprised about that. They thought all I would hear about was public safety, but it wasn't. It was this. And, it's been an ongoing thing for a long time. I think I'm interested in some kind of negotiation with the state because I agree with Councilmember Bergan that 25 million is way too low. But if we could get to a reasonable dollar amount and kind of put all the responsibility under one roof, I think it would make things easier logistically, because I know that's one of the challenges right now is different sections of road are different people's responsibility, and nobody wants to take care of anybody else's responsibility. But at the end of the day, my responsibilities to our residents. And so if we could get to a point where we could get this under one roof with an acceptable amount of money from the state, and without, there's talk of, there might be potential dollars in the future for infrastructure and for other projects and things like that. And so, I don't want to just poo-poo that completely, if we can get to a more reasonable dollar amount. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think that, you have good input from the members of the committee, and good luck with your negotiations with CDOT.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can just close, Councilmember Bergan, we know this is a top priority for you all. And we're working really hard to work with the partners, to work through solutions. And we do have to take some necessary steps on engineering and costing to make sure we have good information to work with, to develop a capital strategy and a capital stack to address the full stretch. So we'll continue to keep you updated. Obviously, we also know that this is a top priority for our residents as well. So we'll work tirelessly to figure this out.
All right, thank you. And we're running a little bit over time. I don't see any reports. Bruce Dalton, it doesn't say no reports. I'm assuming he has a report.
But Councilmember Bergan, knowing that we're past the top of the hour, I'll be more than happy to present the Borealis Festival post report, give it to the city, and they can distribute it to the PED as well as anyone else that's interested. It's great information. We also are just finishing up with the economic impact of travel for the city of Aurora. We've been having trouble getting all of the data because we are in 3 counties, and just scraping down the data specific to Aurora, separating it from the whole counties. We've been able to do so, and we have a meeting with the provider of the report on Friday. So we should be able to give you that as well as a post-event summary of the Borealis Festival by Friday.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate all your hard work, and congratulations as well.
Thank you.
So with that, it is the end of 2024 PED committee. I thank everyone for all of your active participation. To the staff, you've been great giving us information that the committee has requested, and we really appreciate all the hard work. So I want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thanks.